So a while ago, we had the sample phrases that I think everybody sent to me, and so I put all of those together. I will send them out, but just wanted to go through a couple of them that, this is the document that I use, but wanted to go through a couple of them and just talk through any random ones that are out there. Or if you guys if there's more since then that you guys wanna go through. Some of the ones that I added on here were, obviously appraisal gap stuff, because that wasn't on there from before. Let's see here, like if you buy your own house, talking through that commission piece of things, if you don't. No, I think it has to be on an agenda.
I've already sent it on a separate.
Yeah. I think there's some things on here you're gonna want to be separate, some of these. Some of these would be an addendum, some of these might be amendment.
And I think if you're buying your own property, that probably is more of a notification than. Like on a physical, you don't want to put it in purchase agreement, but this, you're just telling the listing agent, hey, I'm not taking it. But take that into account and look at it. So I think either way would be fine for that specific scenario.
Okay, perfect. So. There you go. Attorney, and that stayed the same if you had this doc. How many of you had this document before? Okay, so that one stayed the same, backup, that one stayed the same. Closing, credit approval, competing offers, this was in here, but we also have the, you could put this in section 5 if you wanted to, but a lot of times just using that escalation clause. Offer is in there. Due diligence, I added this one, subject to buyer getting approval by the city for an active rental registration within that 10 days after final acceptance, or how, whatever they need, maybe it's a lot, and they wanna make sure that there's sewer water that can be run to it, or there's some due diligence that needs to be done. Just having that being put into section 5 based on whatever you need. So, subject to the due diligence, let's see, 1031 didn't get added. I added an escalation clause, the escalation clause or escalation clause attached, made part of this offer, either one's just fine. Hour clause, I know you wanted to talk through that.
Yeah, so everybody has a different philosophy on our clauses. Buyer makes a purchase agreement subject to securing contingent free purchase agreement or one contingent. Only the finance on their property, et cetera, et cetera. The attached hour clause, sub clause to be removed. They have an accepted offer, you can write that however you wanted to. So a couple things, what does that second part do to this clause? The C attached 72-hour clause, sub clause to be removed when buyer has an offer on their house. What does that actually mean?
It means that the offer on their house, still needs some financing, so it could fall through.
What does it mean for the offer there? What, are they bumpable or not bumpable if you write that in after they accept an offer on their house?
Once they remove the hour office,
They're not.
then they're not.
Correct, so that's why you should always include that phrasing in there, because once they get an offer on their house, now you become non-bumpable on the one they're trying to. If you don't include that, you're leaving unbumpable, which may be fine because they have an offer anyway, but you're taking that risk away from. That all makes sense? Okay. Other couple things, you can write this clause differently, the first part of it. To be either safer for a buyer or safer for a seller. If you want your buyers to be the safest possible, you write subject to closing on the offer. There's probably not a whole lot of sellers who are going to accept that unless the property is already under offer. The next safest for your buyer and subject to their home being contingent free by such and such a date. Then going back, it's subject to getting an accepted offer on the house. Not to say good for the buyer. Seller. You don't want to string it out to closing, so you probably don't want to accept it subject to closing on your house, because now you're basically stringing them along until after closing that. So you want. Subject to an accepted offer, basically.
Well, I mean, we want that, but fact of the matter is you can't. That buyer, something happens.
Yep.
That deal falls apart. and The bank says, well, you can't buy that other house without. Or you lose your job, or you.
Absolutely, I mean, there are circumstances, yes, I mean, it's just like financing is never really done until you close. There's verification, employment, job loss, whatever. Just a few things to think about there when you're writing it.
I found him.
Yeah, that's all I have to say.
So most of that stuff didn't change from before. Income property, I don't think any that I changed or changed that as well. Most of that was for rental purposes. Section, that is changed. Healthy tank, I added that, I don't know if anybody just tell her to leave the propane tank and any remaining fuel currently in the tank for additional charge. For any acreage.
What about language for prorating? For some, sometimes the question.
Yeah.
I can write it now.
That can be pretty sticky, because you can't really tell how much protein on the internet is really. Temperature and.
But I had to read it.
Yeah, but it's, I think you just have to, yeah, somebody, seller to have. Provider read
Thank you.
things about within 24 hours of closing and. Did that go on the closing disclosure? I literally. didn't-
Usually just ends up being a personal transaction, yeah.
Okay. And buyer to provide check at closing. Or per the bubble. How's that?
The biggest thing is having a conversation with your buyer, because a lot of buyers, all the time with seller's agent says, oh, you owe us $500 for propane, and they no.
Question, sample phrases, and I apologize for getting late if you've already talked about it. So if someone does the form for the personal property, but it's not included on the purchase agreement, you know how we do like the stove, refrigerator, with some they're it's all considered to have no value.
Yeah.
Nothing is mentioned there, but they. So. Do we need to have anything on the purchase agreement, or do we just leave it as is?
So a lot of companies just do it that form.
Okay, so.
I guess I don't, unless it's an escalation clause, I don't ever put. See agenda or whatever,
Then that needs to be turned into the lender, and some lenders don't wanna see it, and that's the reason that
yeah.
some people have to come around.
Yeah.
Do it outside of.
Like the loan, but. Yeah. Very good.
Personal property, possession. So one of the things was seller buyer agreed to, hold prior to possession and then see attached occupancy agreement, so. Somebody just asked, like, moving in, doing some rent back, do whatever, probably the occupancy agreement before or after closing. What needs to be referred to rather than putting something on the actual purchase agreement. What the rent would be, what all that specific is, just use that form and you can just say, see that form.
That way, about rent per day or per month, insurance, what they can do or cannot do. Yeah, you're not gonna cover in section 5.
Purchasing as is, that pretty much stays the same, realtor purchase. In there, really cover rent back, same thing, seller to rent back home or whatever, but also use the occupancy agreement on there. Securing employment, I think that stayed the same. Condition, septic system, somebody had asked, what if, like, right now, you can't really do a new septic system, so you need extra money for it, and you already know that going into it, so. Obviously, septic system, you could do the septic system addendum, or you could put it in section 5, but just says if whether it doesn't permit or is delayed seller to escrow money, it's still need to cover the cost. So it kind of depends. I typically use the form rather than section 5, but it's up to really you guys what you're using and where you're at with that. So like clothing costs, securing replacement property, telephone, and then a couple other random things. So as of June, I just learned this a couple months ago, but sellers do not have to pay for the pest inspection anymore. The buyers can pay for it themselves. That was a change in the VA guidelines. Whereas before sellers had to pay for the buyer's pest inspection and any treatment, that can now fall on the buyer. So I put on here, you can still try, I mean, I still got one in like October for the seller to pay for it. You can still put it in there, based on that, but just know that if it comes back or you're multiple offers, buyer can pay for it, but seller to pay for buyer's pest inspection at a cost not to exceed $150, or I had one that needed to be treated, so then it was a conversation after the fact, like, okay, who's gonna pay for this? So I just put seller to pay for buyer's VA requirements not to exceed $250, so if it does need to be treated for a spray for whatever, that gives you $100 in there to get that treatment. If you're doing relocation, sorry, BPG. So if you're putting an offer in on a relocation, BGRS rider to the purchase agreement is attached and a part of this agreement, so you just need to put that in there in section 5. FHA, buyer responsible or any repairs that come back on FHA appraisal as like an addendum, so you know that the appraiser gets that information, so obviously you can be more specific on this for a dollar amount, but at least it gives you a start of what you need. So one thing that I usually do, especially if it's a PA loan or FHA, or if it's an acreage, like I always go back to this and I review everything to make sure I'm not missing anything. Because a lot of times, like if you don't sell, you don't sell a ton of acreages and you only sell 1 or 2 a year, you may forget the propane tank. So if it's not something that you're typically used to selling, definitely use this sample purchase agreement to to think back and just think about it from your perspective of what needs to go on there. So,
And on that FHA buyer responsible for, I definitely would put a price limit on there
Not to
because,
exceed.
yeah, because you're about to be in a world of hurt. They agree that they'll pay and then all of a sudden there's a $10,000.
It's also nice that you guys have it in, chat loop, so we have it as a form there.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it until a while back, and then I was constantly having to look for it and find it.
oh, yeah.
So I appreciate it being in.
I actually might have Aubrey put it on the agent resources as well.
Okay.
So that way, it's out there. I thought I just saw her. Oh, there she is. Oh, you're behind Ann. That might be good. And then this can be a living, breathing document. So if there's something that is not on here that you typically would use, please send it to me and I can get it updated. We can update it as we do it, because this is a great, I use this especially my first year, man. I use the heck out of this thing my first year. Usually now I can kind of know what I'm doing, but just want to make sure we have this for any reference for anybody.
For like, commercial, that would be helpful on here, that like the base for other people who know nothing.
Kind of depends, like, I do think back to like, not 8 to 9 years ago when I did my first commercial lease deal. And I think I started by writing it up on a bridge agreement instead of a letter and kind of.
Yeah.
Under the offer, there are two that, yeah, I'm just, you get in a situation like that, I think. Give you some advice.
And maybe at some point, I'm gonna nominate you to talk a little bit. What's the purpose of a letter of intent? What goes into a letter of intent? I know they're all different, but what are the steps? lease review and all of that stuff, it might be a good. For people, but
And when you actually got a done deal. Other than when it closes.
So,
so, and then, yeah. I have a good. Kind of as is flat inspection addendum that I found, scoping, looked at how I did last year. First option says buyer and seller agree that the property is sold as the condition, any and all property condition concerns have been addressed in the purchase agreement. The buyer may conduct with respect to city necessary for informational purposes, and they will make no repair, mitigate anything. You won't negotiate. So basically, you come and do it, but you're not gonna get out of the deal, then we're not gonna do it. Option two, buyer and seller can get sold as is, but the buyer can expect property for maintenance, structural, mechanical, et cetera. If the discovery has a major impact on use or rehabilitation of property, buyer may void this offer. So we can get that out as well, I think that's one language that people have been trying to look for a little bit.
Any other things that you think you've missed or you guys typically use that need to be added?
acreage last year, they had a fuel barrel on it as well as propane tank.
Okay.
That was the one. Kind of got a sticker situation left. And
For removal of a fuel barrel.
yeah, it ended up that there was a tenant on the property that ended up in Indian. Yeah. So, you know, just be on an acreage just in generally. All property.
Yeah. And on an acre, you probably put something to survey. Language in.
Oh,
If you wanted to know what lot line, but I would play this, even if you're not separating into the public. No.
There is encroachment and they're saying that there isn't, but you know that deal that you talked to Jolene about or whatever. I didn't want to write on that tonight. And she said there's encroaching properties and you couldn't see that, so.
So, well, in our first agreement, if you do a survey and you found that there are encroachments, they are treated like title defects and have to be figured out prior to close.
Okay,
To get clear title, that's how our first agreement.
okay, but since we already know, talking to the city, that that's the case,
Right.
so. I mean, it's a shed, it's the garage of the neighbors.
Right.
So would I ask them to have it resurveyed and corrected?
I would. I mean, I don't know what if they end up buying it without, it at what point then the neighbor with the encroachment claim that it's their property.
And the other, the neighbor sell part of the property to make.
Their
sure-
garage is on it.
Right.
The neighbor's garage is on the property. I.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
But it says there's no encroachments, and they had a deal fall apart because of it, and it still hasn't been changed.
Right, so that disclosure should say that there are, they do know.
Jim Williamson or something, it's in Nashville, but he's out of Cedar Rapids. And I asked him, I go, when was the last time you were there? Cause there's some weird stuff. They got kind of, I mean, apparently he hadn't ever been at that initially when Darlene had gone on. Formally.
Yeah, I just put it subject to those. Getting taken care of. Or easily agree, I mean. It's okay to have those on the property, but we're gonna have it easily too. So,
I didn't know that was the property until they.
yeah,
No, that actually one. Oh, is this, oh my God, that's the one that fell apart.
Okay, perfect. No questions on this, we'll move on to inspection. I know Lauren's on here as well, talk through some inspection, and Lauren, I guess you had some questions on it. Do you have any anything you want to start the conversation around?
Yeah, I had the sellers and obviously Campbell wasn't like a gem. It needs some work. And some of it was obvious. And then Amy's office came back and it was just very specific stuff like requesting certain contractors to do the work and just like I mean, they really kind of hammered the inspections. So just kind of like how to navigate that on the seller side. And is that something as buyers agents we should be more aggressive with?
Did the deal ultimately fall apart because you didn't want to do work with the contractors they were suggesting? Or for other reasons?
Some of the things were kind of unreasonable, like they wanted a whole new electrical panel put in when like it was obvious there's a fuse box in the panel there and it worked just fine. And they had an electrician come and quote it to do that. The radon was high, like that's some things were reasonable, but some were like they wanted a certain pest person to come in and take care of the bats. When it's like they wanted the most expensive one. So I mean, that's why it fell apart. My sellers were willing to meet them halfway and are doing some of the things regardless. But it just was like kind of a tough one.
Question would be to that other agent is, do those buyers want out the deal? If they do, then there's really no negotiating with it, like get them out and we want that first, like, you know, whether that's, you know, are they asking for $10,000 for repairs or whatever, because they truly think that repairs, they just want out a deal. Right.
But I don't think they would go get contractors to come to the house if they just wanted out, if they knew that they were like bigger issues that were going to be solved. Like,
Yeah.
I would hope that the agent wasn't wasting their own time meeting
Right.
contractors. But
Yeah.
but
I-
yeah, I've had that conversation.
My opinion, specifying a contractor, like, that's fine, but I think as the buyer's agent, the listing if it comes back and says, hey, we'll have X, Y, Z company use it, and they're contractor, and they do a good job.
Yeah.
They will either do it or we'll give you their quote, we'll give you $1,000, and if you want to go have Corey Meyer do the bat mitigation, and it's gonna cost $5,000, whatever, we'll give you that. That's probably what I would do if you're not comfortable with the contractor we're gonna use. We'll use licensed contractors if it's for electrical or plumbing or that. I think as a listing agent, it's not fair to tell you that we have to use this person if it is. With other contractors, we can do a good job for a lot.
Well, I could make a amount and put a bid and then just take it on themselves, but if they're really specific on who they want doing everything, I mean, they can get a bid and then just say, some of the this and we'll take it on them.
Is that normal? Has anyone else seen that where people are like so specific on their request?
Very few times.
Or with like radon contractors, because some of those ones that are really cheap, I think they do it cheaply.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I have, but I don't go Malin to go with.
Not really.
Matt Griswold, you know, I'm taking someone that does good work and is medium, not
Yeah.
Malin, who's the most expensive, so I've done great on his work.
Or I would ask. Have so-and-so do it, or give it to them like. That same way, we'll do it ourselves.
Yeah, and I have that conversation with my client, saying they might want to be someone else because they're cheaper, or like Amy has a relationship with whoever in Waverly, and so he gets some good deal. So they might just, hey, if you take the $1,000, you can have who you want to do it after closing, that's probably better off. If you do it.
Well, most sellers are gonna do the cheapest, easiest
Oh,
bid,
for sure.
even if you indicate that it's qualified. You can't blame them for that. The risk you take, if you decide to take an amount instead of having them actually fix it, you're taking it on and you control it.
If it's radon crystal, it's usually among the least expensive, and
Yeah.
that's probably who you saying, but they,
Yeah, no, I just know there's some smaller ones. Christmas does a good job, but then
Yeah,
there's other ones that I don't think is too probably in there.
And Lauren, with the back thing, like. That deal, there are other back companies that are much cheaper to do the exact thing, so. If someone
Yeah.
fails because a specific contractor they want can't do it, they should get that for the money.
Okay.
I think maybe November, December, we were gonna get used to doing inspections, like being able to ask for reasonable things, but. That might be changing again. If you only either not doing an inspection or. Making sure your buyers ask for only the safety defective bigger ticket items. And also when you're. Make sure you point out everything that is obvious. Driveway, it's low, it's crap. You can't ask for a new driveway during the inspection, like those things are what won't. Fly. When you make those requests.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and like most of you guys know, is just prepping the buyer for those things that you're already seeing, or especially like first time home buyers, doing it in a buyer consultation meeting, talking through that. But then also just reminding them in that inspection piece on what they're getting, what they should or should not. Impact.
Education. The 10-year-old. It. The inspector's gonna come in and say, it's 10 years old. Getting. Or we're gonna need some maintenance, or if in 5 or 10 years, you might need to replace it. Doesn't mean there's any. Wrong. So you can't have for a new furnace because the inspector said it's. Water heaters are probably more prime example of that. A 7-year-old water heater. It could last 7 and it could last 50. For no rhyme or reason. So just making sure you're pointing out. Those big things when you're. Looking at it.
How would you work? So I was in a house the other day that. Really had a brand new water heater put in by like. And. it was not put in correctly. Plumber would not do this.
Yes.
Right? How would you like? Either on the purchase agreement or. We could see it in the. Wow. How? So we're gonna do something right when we purchase it or not. So licensed plumber inspect and make.
Anything that's. Being the. Yeah.
Would you want that in the first agreement though? Based on the fact that now, appraiser. I mean, I guess I'm just asking, you know, the lender and the appraiser is now.
For something like that, I would put it on there.
Okay.
And you just have to prove that it was done.
They can have the removal, but, okay.
Yeah, and you, the letter's gonna ask for. An invoice or receipt, something, so just know when you put them on there, be prepared that that's gonna happen, otherwise, if not, then you just have to put it on the vendor. What other things on inspections, any other? I talked to another agent yesterday, again, sewer scope has been getting a little bit more popular. And so he was dealing with, that on a house that, they brought in a sewer scope, and so the buyer, I don't know if there was major issues, but they had wanted it cleaned out from the house all the way to the street. And stuff was needed to be replaced in there, so just a heads up from, you know, whether you have a listing or you have a buyer, I don't know who did the sewer scope and all, I'm not sure if it was an inspector, I can't imagine that any inspector has.
Probably they want to go on.
Bergen.
Yeah. One thing with sewer. I just had a client have to replace her whole sewer line because of it. Gone back up and there's actually nothing collapsed in the line, but when they did the scope, they found that. It was running uphill to the sewer. And her insurance won't cover it. Yeah, because there was not a blockage or a collapse. It was just, it's been like that for years. Unlock one that. So if we would have done the sewer scope and that, in fact, we had it as a inspected. They see what angle. That also goes, that's a pretty good 1 in a million. In happening, but. We'll probably say there's 10 or 15,000. We've had probably 5 to 10 collapsed sewer lines or breakages in sewer lines in the past year. And they'll just deal with it in our office. And it's about $125 to $115 or $150 per.
I did have one with the sewer code on this thing. 3 years ago, where the sewer code stuck. That was not. Did eventually get out, but they had to go on the floor.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
I've had a few clients. Who recently, they both come back totally fine. But one was on. Was that program
Oh, okay.
out on Cimarron. That are going to be moldy, because their 3/4 covered in dirt and moisture. And then I think.
Who did that?
John Paul. That he never installed and I sent it in the.
Okay, fine.
Yep. DFL apart from many other reasons. Was a very great inspection.
Or delivery?
There's prep of everything and. You need to be there for everything.
The other day, there is an agent, at the Remax that, is going to be doing the inspection. And I shared the name of the inspector and she said, my seller will probably not allow others in the house. And I said, well, why is that? And, she said, well, he, one time with another one of my buyers told them what they needed to score in the inspection period, and that is unprofessional. I said, so how do your sellers know
Yeah.
that they, and so what? So to be honest, and this was the second time I'd heard this, so I said, well, you're not gonna tell me who I am, because who I'm gonna use and who I'm not gonna use, unless there's a conflict of interest with the seller and the inspector, like, unfortunately, you're sharing information, so my buyers are gonna choose who they wanna choose and who they feel is appropriate for them and comfortable. So just know that there is a little bit of that going along that, because first time this happened, there's like two of them, which this person was like, I'm gonna use this person, well, you can't use that one, well, then I'm gonna use this one, well, you can't use that one either, so it was like, no, you're not gonna tell me, so just know that your buyers can pick who they want to do the inspection with, unless there is some literally conflict of interest, then don't let some of these other agents dictate.
I would have a hard time letting John Bronner into one of my listings. Like I would have a hard time working with a buyer who wanted to. I mean, it's just. I don't.
How do you make that? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's something you.
I've never,
Every seller, like, we've got a tough guy.
Yeah.
And talk to the buyer
But then-
too and say, hey.
I don't think he looks out for clients, but I think like he recommended for like vanity because they're dated. Like
I think so. John quite a bit, Chris would be kind of the same way, like, if you prep your buyer going in, it alleviates so many problems. Because John does a very thorough inspection, Chris did a very thorough inspection. I mean, there's a lot of guys, prepping your, you're gonna do the plumbing inspection, what you could do. Did it, the other things like. I would just, but then we'll talk about that. We'll they. How complexity,
I think sometimes so with inspections, it's, and this is the disconnect I sometimes had, but then I haven't had a lot of experiences with them, but is giving, appropriate recommendations to, you know, fix something or whatever, because there's always going to be a million issues with the house, but are we looking at $500 or $5,000? And some inspectors are really good at giving you kind of a ballpark or an idea of who and how to approach the repair. I think sometimes that's where it can get a little bit tricky. Some inspectors are a little bit more aggressive to, or are willing to share their recommendation on how to fix it. But again, buyer prep is really important because it's kind of like electricians. You know, you might have 3 electricians come in to fix something, and they'll all do it differently. But they're all appropriate or, you know, per code, per se, they're just different.
I think I guess we should have to focus on our, if we're representing the buyers, buyer crowd, yeah.
and maybe as an acceleration right now. We are still getting multiple offers. Maybe backup offers are. More important than you can either play a little hard while playing, you have one way to win. Yeah, we're not gonna do much, we're not gonna do only serious stuff. Might be a way, or if it does fall apart, because the buyer is figured out, you can just go with plan B without having to go back on the market and go through the whole.
So I got that one fall apart because of that.
Yeah.
You're thinking.
I think a lot of times it just. Some of the. More thorough inspectors, it just makes our job harder than it. Could be. And that's, I think, it's the most appropriate.
Sometimes it just feels like an ego class. I'm sorry to say that, but that's what it feels like. It's like, oh, I know. I mean, like you might try to ease the blow a little bit, like, okay, but you know, and that just makes everybody on edge. Because then your buyer's looking at you like, who are you working for? And you're trying to say, well, we didn't buy it for your home. You know, it just makes it tricky. The only thing I would say is if a seller or I've had listing agents ask who my buyers are gonna use for an inspection, for an inspector, and they have ones that they do not want. That kind of is a red flag to me, like, why are you so defensive on who my buyer chooses? Like, I actually think it kind of looks bad on the seller and seller's agent if we say, I want this person to come in,
Yeah.
because it looks like you're trying to hide that.
I might say to the agent, oh, that's a little worrisome to me, I've had some issues before, but I would never say you can't use or you don't use or. And I might quote them, you shouldn't put your buyer.
Yeah.
You know.
I think Whitney had one a few years ago and they rejected John Braun and then I don't know if he had the buyer or the seller, but he did the year before when the home was on the market, got an inspection, misdiagnosed some problems, but then they had gotten professionals out to evaluate. And then he somehow came up as an inspector again with a new buyer and the seller did refuse because they said, no, this guy's a moron. He came out and said, our house is not strapped down and this and that, we have documentation.
And that's, I think, a different story, if they have a specific incident that says, I've used them before, unfortunately it wasn't, and this is live, it was her opinion.
Yeah.
But,
I never do that before.
yeah. I just know that we have some newer agents that don't know what they don't know, right? Like, and so having somebody around,
Yep.
not appropriate and knowing where your boundaries are, so. That was the first time for me, and I was like, I'm newer, but not that newer now. No, you're not going here, so. What other things, inspections?
Has anybody done a pre-listing inspection at all?
Dan, do next, that's one out of hand.
Yeah.
I did it once. It was okay. I don't know that it really helped that much. Right now, I think if our market is strong as it sounds like it is,
Why not?
I don't know that we need to do a lot, so.
Yeah.
You're just asking for more repairs and.
Yeah.
It could,
Unless you can bump your price a little bit and you can give the buyers have it sitting on the counter, so every buyer that walks through feels like there's a sense of peace knowing
well,
these things were done.
it could get more people to waive it,
Absolutely,
Right.
yeah,
as long as things are addressed and
yeah,
taken care of. You're probably only gonna do those on the house that, you know, nothing crazy major is gonna
yeah.
go up. So
Yeah.
that could be one strategy of, I just want everybody to waive it.
Yeah.
Everybody, here it is, put it in Paragon or leave it on the table, this is what we're gonna allow.
Have you ever had anybody test for lead? That big thing?
One, we just did the Menards. Hit, you break it, you dab it on the siding or whatever you're doing, and it came back negative. I almost had another one that did it, but they did not want to find out because they knew the fix was going to make things terrible potentially. And their kids
Yeah,
getting done and they like, so they're like, what's gonna happen?
I've never had one. But
Yeah, climb those Menards, get,
Okay.
wipe it on the siding and it turns. Things get positive or whatever.
I can basically guarantee that if it's built before 1980, it probably has. Like,
It might be covered up, but if you're ever.
there's,
It's probably different than like asbestos, because if you had asbestos tile. I mean, and you tested that and you knew it was truly asbestos tile, that's a pretty big, I mean, mitigation.
Yeah.
Where lead is pretty. You know, so.
There's a lot of stuff, there's the potential stuff is. Fucking food wraps, hate that. We see more often, we probably care to, and those can get very expensive. You know,
I would enjoy an inspector that will say, if it's there, it's on the stuff, just leave it alone.
Right, yeah,
It's not hurting it.
Yeah.
It's not, it's disturbed.
Right.
But
Sure.
there are some people who get really freaked out by it, just because we tell them. It's 8 feet in the air.
I would call the inspector to do that, that way more just needs to be done.
I would like Jim Road, go buy a can of spray paint, it to seal it up, you know, that was his go-to, and I'm gonna say that, make people feel better.
Yeah. So. Delivery from inspectors.
Yeah. He was out giving cookies with one of those Sunday.
Yeah. No, it's low.
I don't know,
But he had cancer surgery, he's been up for 12 months.
Right.
He did an inspection for me, and I got a lot of things finished, but this is my first one in 4 months. No.
This is what no longer doing. That's bad.
No.
If you had enough-
We're gonna do it.
No, I liked him as a person, yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah, an inspector was tricky at times, but I know it's right, like.
And then Mark Schleisman, he just retired as well.
Really?
Yeah, so I like them.
Who's out there?
And the,
Alan, Benny,
Dave, Ellen,
Robert Ballvan,
Will Carter.
Will Carter.
from
Ruben,
House Master,
Elk Proctor.
Mike.
where's that name?
I know, my.
Let's go with the flags.
Black Hawk inspection, I think it'd be.
He still do it.
I think so.
What's Whitetail? What's his name?
Mark, or Matt Mine.
He's still doing it?
Yes, he did one on. Friend fucking for a while.
Other thing with inspections, just a reminder, do not call an inspector for your buyer and pick one. I always recommend them, so I send an email out and say, here's 3 options, but you can pick whoever you want. And you call, because as we all know, in the middle of a really fun situation, and that was one of the things that was asked to me in the first proceedings was, did you pick the inspector for them? And I said, nope, I have an email here that says, here are 3, you call and you pick. Because if you call and you pick, then that could be, if something happens, then, well, you were trying to get the sale done, or you were trying to do whatever, so. It's always best, case scenario to send 3 out. Let them pick, let them call, let them choose, and just let you know where that's at, and that you're always.
And the inspector too will also go over all of the things that. General inspector, we all have to do on a radar, if you're setting that up. You don't know, oh, what if the home inspector, well, what if they want to read on it, you forgot it, so things that they can be responsible for.
I always tell them, because I send out the text message with them contact as well, as time go through and I look them up on. The internet or Facebook, and determine which is a good fit for you, because you may not like, one over the other, or you might be connected to one, so I do the same thing.
Somebody I don't know who I'm talking to, and they're like, oh, really? Always call me, and I'm like, I would not do that if I were you. I would like, I would.
Especially because they're the client, they're the customer.
Yep. Any other questions or thoughts around inspection at all?
A home warranty can kind of offset some potential ifs and buts with, you have a newer buyer that's nervous. And there's a lot of little things that could be concerned. A home warranty could be a good alternative. to this.
Right.
Yeah.
At the recommended saving, infected, like.
Some of the warranty companies I've had, I've dealt with before, if anybody hasn't ever dealt with them, you have to call the number specific, you can't just call your own person. You gotta call the number, then they gotta call somebody. I've had somebody that the warranty company that they used, there was nobody contracted around the Cedar Valley with them. So they had somebody coming from North Liberty to fix their furnace. So just something to think about, and. It's just maybe a tough situation depending on what company you use.
I had one in New Hampton and nobody would pick it up, and so then she actually said that she could pick it, who she wanted to come out there, and they could come out there, and then she would have to pay him, but submit the bill, and she did get reimbursed.
Okay.
So, but I mean, she had to go through the company.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say, I feel like I haven't had a couple that didn't, I asked about kind of pre-existing, like older conditions. I've had a couple that I thought they said that they would cover it as long as it was working at the time of purchase. I have to double check.
Mine has covered. Older, a lot of it is like if you have an inspection, they would like you to have an inspection.
Yeah, to show that it's working.
Yes.
Yeah, I had one with the water heater where the inspector came in and there was a couple things a little wrong with it, so they did not replace it, even though it was working. It wasn't, well, also, don't get in the habit of saying, I'll pay for the home warranty if you waive your inspection. That's gonna look bad. So that's been said by people before.
I have done a lot of things. I've heard nothing about that. Yep.
Steve Page used to always say, just think about how this would sound in front of the judge. Yeah. Just think through what it would.
Because you say a lot of sellers would pay for inspections if they didn't think they'd have any repairs. Right, when sellers say, I'll never pay for a BPS or anything.
So was that, anything on agent saying that, or
Yeah.
sellers? saying?
So, which can be a conversation, but not quite. If you're comfortable waiving an inspection, maybe a safety net is to get a home run on the property.
Filling eggs. Do you guys have any other inspection or items? Oh, well, that's crazy.
Did we already talk about market.
Oh, you talk about market.
Briefly did, November, December, we thought we were gonna be kind of normal.
Yeah.
I think more people in multiple are still including inspection in it. There are still people who are waiving. Not nearly to the degree
It's not universal.
of last spring. I think buyers in general are a little more careful or will wait.
And we're not seeing as many over the top offers.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Right now, like, the Centennial went yesterday with 3 offers and it went, it was at 350, 357. So, not,
375.
right, not $20,000 over.
Hold on, just as, that Vermont.
Yeah.
yeah,
And have not that far.
I think that went 10 over.
Yeah, which somebody else, he had like 3 or 4 polls and then somebody did step up. But
But
we
10
had,
over isn't crazy at all.
no, it's
55.
point, we had that inspection. I think we could have. Potentially, if they would have stepped up.
We don't have inspections and the potential of waiving them. And think, like, when we talked about what are the major things, the biggest expense in furnace, air, roof, windows. So let's take a look at those 4 major components. And could you live with the expense of everything, anything else if you haven't? So. If you had newer of those things, we can feel more comfortable with them.
I think right now buyers, market wise, anything that is newer, feels newer, shows really cute is moving and moving fast and quickly with multiple offers, like especially that first time home buyer does not want to fix anything. They don't want to update anything. A lot of times they don't even want to paint.
Yeah.
Like, so I think we're seeing a lot of those move very quickly. I think that's why Vermont went so quickly with so many offers is it had just been redone a year or 2 ago. Pray and, you know, we were.
Well, my Ethan went this morning, they, the office this morning, which was, I tried to convince them to wait until end of the day, had like 9 more showing. And they didn't want to wait, they took the offer, and it was okay. But
That goes into what we talked about yesterday, a little bit. Get your offers in because you don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily we're gonna wait through the day for all of them.
Right.
But don't hold on to get.
Yeah.
If you find out 5 more came in and you wanna change yours, change it at that point.
At color when one wait.
they just want to move.
But that's,
Yeah.
depending on your seller situation, yes, in general, you would think they'd want everything. But
But they were happy with the offer, and they wanted to take it, it's like. But we have, one, you know, all of their going, but we may not, we might, may not, but at the same time, we may. But they took it.
Do they have dogs?
And yeah, and she was out most of the day yesterday, I was in the rain, I have, like, I don't do it. Which is understandable,
Yeah, the convenience factor.
yeah.
So I have a unique situation, always, but I have a buyer who wrote on a property that Haley Anderson had listed in Appleton on that. So my buyer wrote an offer subject to the sale of her house. Her niece wants to buy her house, but her niece has to sell her house. So they're not, they have Emily Scoot from Century 21, or I think she's from Century 21, Berkshire, working on for the niece. She didn't necessarily need, and I can respect and understand, of course, I'd love to help with her sale, but that didn't need to happen, I guess. So long story short, the niece has already shown and said she can do a bridge loan But they aren't necessarily going to activate a bridge loan unless we get served 24-hour notice. I think that's crap. Like, I'm frustrated for the sellers that we're buying from, because like I do Zillow in Parkersburg, Appleton. I'm getting calls all the time. I'm gonna go show it. I know my house is gonna perform. The sellers, they're not my sellers, but those sellers have dogs and have been super inconvenienced. It's just very frustrating because they're actually gonna put something in writing that says, because I told my buyer, just tell them to do the bridge loan. Tell them you don't want to have to worry about subject to the sale. Because if they're, first of all, they haven't listed their house because they're afraid it's gonna sell so fast that they can't even call their bluff. Like, tell them you did, first of all, it could have been on the market, subject to that secure and suitable property.
Yeah.
You know, whatever, but anyways, that's just kind of frustrating and unique, because essentially I've got a subject to the sale sitting out there that I know if we get served, they're gonna perform. But I can't necessarily get that other buyer to do the original.
That's also the buyer's prerogative. Maybe they are, I mean, just because I qualify to spend $500 more money doesn't mean I'm comfortable.
No, and I realize that.
If they got served, they could perform, right?
Right, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with the fact that it's their ability. I think it's unique because knowing that essentially we're all on the same page, the dominoes are gonna fall. It's just a matter of convenience and risk, really. It's frustrating. If I represented that buyer, I probably wanted to do the same thing. I just don't represent that buyer.
I guess you just got a lead already.
All the houses that aren't on the market, they got this huge story. We all have those little rainbow track, 55 grand, like you, could be called. We good? Now we're stopping and sorting? Yeah. Thanks for joining, Lauren.